I was thinking about how important it is to be honest, and especially to be honest with ourselves, and how difficult that can be, you know, because it's so easy to see other people's faults and foibles and point the finger and understand their weaknesses, but it's very difficult to see our own. And even when we see our own, it's often very difficult to admit those to ourselves, because we like to think that we're people who are in control and competent and on top of everything. We have that self-image of ourselves that we hold to. Plus, we want to project that kind of image to other people. And so sometimes looking at our mistakes or our weak points kind of shakes all of that, and we just don't want to go there. Yeah, and so we keep up, you know. So it's a kind of subtle way of lying to ourselves, or what's the mental factor called? Concealment. Yeah. You know, concealing from ourselves and from others, you know, and they both have different effects. Of course, when we conceal things from others, it leads to a lot of confusion in relationships, because eventually things come out and people don't trust us, and there's confusion because there was misinformation. But I think especially when we conceal things from ourselves in this attempt to appear competent and in control to ourselves, that we really deceive ourselves and prevent ourselves from growing. Yeah, and I know sometimes I've had points in my practice where I just look, and I remember one time quite early on in my practice, and it was like I just had to admit, everything I do is 8 worldly concerns. That's it. I'm not going to try and pretend it's something not that, because that's just the reality of what it is, you know. And that it felt, when I did that, there was a sense of relief, and there was also a sense of faith in the Buddha's teachings that came, because I was able to see that what the Buddha was saying about attachment to the 8 worldly concerns was incredibly true in my own case, you know. And as long as I hadn't owned up to that, it was like, well, the Buddha talks about that, but that's other people, you know, or he's exaggerating, you know, just kind of exaggerating what the 8 worldly concerns are, something like that. But once I just said, no, frankly, this is what my mind's all about, then it actually brought up more confidence in the path. And I remember another time when, you know, when you just look at the 4 distortions, seeing impermanent things as permanent, things that are foul as beautiful, things that are unsatisfactory in nature as pleasurable, things that lack a self as having a self. And after really contemplating those things and just going, you know, my mind is in total hallucination. You know? It's like these 4 conceptions, yes, this is exactly what's going on in my mind. And again, it was a really humbling experience to be that honest and acknowledge it. But at the same time, it was like, oh, now I understand why the Buddha says the things the way he says them, and points out things the way he does, and talks about these remedies, because this is the situation in my own mind that I see clearly. So it was strange how that was, because it kind of, in one way, shattered this illusion that I like to, you know, to think, oh yeah, I'm kind of a good practitioner and, you know, together person and everything, by admitting just, you know, my mind has nothing to do with reality. I mean, seriously, just, you know, when you see things that don't have a self as having one, and things that are impermanent as permanent, you know, I'm not talking about intellectually we say, oh yes, everything's impermanent, but you know, how we really look at things, you know. And so how actually identifying that and admitting it to myself, being honest to myself, actually inspired a much closer connection with the Buddha Dharma Sangha. So it's kind of interesting how that happened. So I think that, this kind of self-honesty is something that's quite important for us in order to grow as individuals. And we shouldn't approach it by cajoling ourselves, oh, I've got to be honest with myself, like I'm the judge and jury and now I'm going to get to the bottom of, this, because that kind of approach to ourselves just doesn't work. It has to be done with clarity and kindness, and with a lot of self-acceptance. And, knowing that there's a way to change things. So that's the good part.